So the floods in Nepal have been absolutely devastating. Authorities in Nepal have recovered 350 bodies. That number is likely to go up very sharply over the next couple of days. More than 1,300 people are still missing. There are over 288 Indians missing and 200 stranded across Nepal. But as scientists investigate what caused the flood, it's unraveling something far scarier than what we've seen even so far. The Himalayas, in the shadow of which so many Indians still live, are completely unstable. What is happening really in the ecosystem of the Himalayas, and why should we be very, very concerned in India? That's what we're going to be looking at in this video. Remember, share, subscribe. If you feel that this information is useful to someone, please send this video forward. Now, this is what happened on Wednesday morning. A massive flash flood came rushing across Nepal, especially across the Tibetan border. The devastation was immediate. Entire settlements were wiped out. Vehicles, buildings just swept away. Bridges collapsed. And the roads that connected Kathmandu with other parts of Nepal were completely destroyed. And I told you what that toll has already been. Now, initially, scientists said that it was an earthquake because instruments at that Tibet-Nepal border registered an earthquake of the magnitude of 4.4. Now, 13 minutes later, the river monitoring station stopped transmitting, and then at 9:05 a.m., authorities received information about a huge flash flood that's entering Nepal from Tibet. Warning messages went out to 600,000 phones. But it was not fast enough. The racing river was faster. Authorities understandably wondered whether the earthquake caused the landslide that triggered the flood. But we now understand from the US Geological Survey that it was not an earthquake at all. What it was instead was a massive glacial collapse and debris flow. Now, what happens effectively, and we've tried to put this together in an AI video for you, effectively a section of the mountain with the ice and the rock on it collapsed with enough force to make the earthquake measuring instruments interpret it as an earthquake. The material crashed into the river system, and scientists are still establishing exactly what the sequence of events were after that, because water seems to have accumulated behind debris, and then it suddenly broke through, and that sudden breaking through of water led to an enormous surge of water, rock, mud, all moving downhill. And because Himalayan valleys are so steep and so narrow, the surge traveled very quickly, swallowing up everything that was in its way. Now, here are 3 points as to why we should be really worried because we live in the shadow of the Himalayas. Now, one, the Himalayas are not a stable mountain. They appear enormous and ancient and permanent, but they're none of those things. The Himalayas are still being formed. You'll remember in geography class, we were told that an Indian tectonic plate crashed into a Eurasian tectonic plate to form the Himalayas. But here's the thing, that crash is still ongoing. It moves by 5 centimeters every year. That's what makes the Himalayas taller, but it also makes it really unstable. So earthquakes here are regular, and they're not the only problem. Earthquakes lead to landslides, to avalanches, to rockfalls, and the rivers that run below those mountains are constantly hazardous. The second problem that makes it worse is climate change. The Himalayas are getting warmer, and the glaciers across the Hindu Kush Himalayan region are shrinking and melting faster than we had even realized. I give you 2 pieces of information. The International Center of Integrated Mountain Development released a report in March 2026 this year. It said glacial ice loss across the Hindu Kush Himalaya region has doubled since the year 2000. The reports also found that the region lost 12% of glacial area between 1990 and 2020, and up to 27 meters of ice thickness since 1997. So basically, the ice is melting. That's the short story. 2019, a study found that Himalayan ice loss increased drastically with every year, and it's essentially been doubling in the last couple of decades. So melting glaciers are not our only problem. There are parts of the mountain that are held together by permafrost, which means soil and rock that has traditionally always been frozen. And now it's getting defrosted. As temperatures rise, that frozen material starts to thaw, and when it does, it will actually slip down the side of the mountain. Dr. Simon Cook, who's a glacial expert, spoke to BBC about this particular disaster, and he said It is permafrost, long frozen soil and rock that keeps the mountainsides together, that's warming and thawing and degrading. The third reason, remember, we talked about the fact that the Himalayas are young and unstable, and two, climate change. The third reason, the retreating glaciers create something called glacial lakes, where if there's a massive block of ice, it appears that the ice is melting in the middle and creating a pool of water or a lake of water. And when that breaks, that water suddenly joins the river downstream. So what's happening? The natural barriers are failing because of climate change. Enormous water suddenly becomes released through what is known as a glacial lake outburst flood. We've seen this before. This is not new. In 2023, there was a glacial lake outburst that caused catastrophic flooding in Sikkim. 179 people were killed. In 2021, 200 people were killed when a flash flood swept through Uttarakhand. That was also a glacial lake outburst. So that brings us to the question that I started this video with. Should people in India be concerned and worried? Well, the Himalayas stretch, we've called them our roof, for so long across the entire northern frontier for India. Millions live directly in Himalayan states, depend on the Himalayas for livelihood, for agriculture, for water. If we look at what happened in Nepal, the flood entered the Botikoshi River, it then went to the Trishuli River, and then eventually that water comes into India in Bihar, where we call it the Gandak River. So a collapse high in the mountain, many, many kilometers away, will flood downstream. And we've seen that we've actually made things more difficult for ourselves by adding roads and tunnels and hotels and townships, hydropower projects and tourism infrastructure, encouraging more and more people towards the mountains. So what happens is, if there is an event like this, more people will be at risk when that flood does happen. And the region is affected not just by disaster. 9 to 10 major hydropower projects are being built and operated right now in those regions. Our immediate concern with Nepal, there is still a concern. Apparently, scientists are now worried that the enormous amounts of rock and debris that have entered the river have created blockages downstream, and those blockages are not stable and they could actually collapse and the water could flow down again, which is why in India, in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, we are currently on alert for the possibility of any sort of flooding in any of our rivers. The Himalayas have always been geologically unstable. They're also warming. The glaciers are melting. This is something we have to take into consideration for any development. Should we be worried? Yes, of course, in India we should be worried. We should also be very cautious. Any sort of development project that we decide to undertake in the Himalayan region needs to be cautious, scientific, and well prepared for the risks that it's taking on.